Let's face it, financial planning can be boring and stressful. Thankfully, Financial Advisor On Call has changed all that. We created a platform where you can get convenient access to a whole team of financial professionals without paying expensive commissions or asset fees. Think of telemedicine applied to financial services. Let us help make your life easier today. Don't delay, your future awaits.
Welcome to Covering Your Six, where we explore how to pursue a better and more meaningful life by focusing on the 6 F's of faith, family, friends, fitness, finance, and fun. Today is an awesome day to get better and to try something new. So let's get it on. Timmy, what is going on today?
Jim, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, man.
You look good. You look like you're a NASCAR driver. All your sponsorships on your arm.
I do. Shirt. We have to represent things on here, man. We got our sponsor, Financial Advisor, on call with the great ad that we have. And then the hat's actually my book that I have, The Financial Pocket Knife. People want to go out to Amazon, they can hit that up.
The Financial Pocket Knife book you wrote. It's pretty awesome. I've read it a couple times.
Well, thank you. But we actually have another book that people should get today. So I always appreciate a little plug on mine. But listen, our guest today wrote a book called Expect to Win. I'm holding it up if you're watching this on YouTube or any of the video platforms. And this is by Monte Holm. And Monte is a good personal friend of ours and known him for a long time. Listen, Monte is the epitome of the 6 F's that we talk about on here, covering the 6. And man, what a great guy! I think you'll see that during the whole interview that we have here. He's done some tremendous things that we get into, but Monte's just a huge leader. He's a leader in his church. He's a leader in business. He's just a genuine guy, man. I mean, Tim, you've spent time with him.
Oh, he is. He's fantastic. I mean, he's one of the most successful people you'll ever meet in your life, and you would never even know it as far as his attitude and he's humble, and he talks to you like you're the only person in the room, and he legitimately cares about you and what's going on in your life. So it's amazing to see that. His book is great too. It talks about balance, talks about success, the different aspects of success and where you need to be. And I enjoyed that book a lot. It's helped me too.
Yeah. It makes just so much sense as we'll get into it. We talk about a lot of things with Monte just in his life, but the book Expect to Win, number one is having that mindset, but then it's having a plan to do it. How do you plan that out? And basically, not to run the book, but it's backwards engineering, right? You got to have your vision and then you sort of go backwards to figure out the steps you need to take to get there. So I think we're in for a treat today, the audience is. And if you listen closely, you can learn a lot. And this, all these things that we do with these people, Tim, we should I'd recommend taking notes, and you don't got to listen to the whole podcast at one time, because I know sometimes we're driving to work or anything, but, just go over and take some notes and think about this stuff. You can learn so much from these tremendous people that we get on the podcast.
Oh, that's great idea. Because just one or two little tips that you get in one podcast can make a huge difference. So, and Monte's got tons of tips that can make massive difference in your life. So pay attention for sure.
Yeah. And, you can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you're not intentional, you don't take action on it, then it doesn't really matter. Right. So Hopefully you find the podcast entertaining, but more than that, take something from it and just, be intentional about it and start changing the things in your life that you would like to change and to be successful of whatever that endeavor is for you. So that's it. Let's go ahead and introduce you to Mr. Monte Holm.
Monte Holm, so good to see you. I'm so glad to have you here. I'm excited about today. Appreciate you coming by.
Thank you, Jim. Good to be with you.
Let's go ahead and get started. We got a lot of great things to cover here, but let's get to know about you first of all. We have your book we're going to go through, and you have some background in there. But let's just talk about your current situation, because you have a rather large family now, right?
I do have a large family. My wife and we got married. I wanted a small family, and she wanted a big one, and she won.
So you have 6 children.
We have 3 boys and then 3 girls in that order.
3 boys and 3 girls. But I know the biggest thing you're proud about is your grandchildren. Last count I knew, you were up to 20. Is that right?
We currently have 20 grandchildren. It's easy to have a lot of grandkids when you have a lot of kids.
That's right.
But we have grandkids, and each one is so precious and incredible. And I often say that if I'd have known how good it is to have grandkids, I'd have skipped the kids and jumped right to the grandkids.
No, that's what my mom tells me all the time, too. So.
We love those grandkids.
That's awesome. And how long have you been married, by the way?
We've been married for 41 years.
41 years. Good. You're answering all the questions right. I know I asked one time, I asked your wife, I said, asked her to name all the grandkids, and she knew right away. So.
She knows their names and their birthdays and all that. I know their names. And some of the birthdays, I'm at all the birthday parties, at least the ones I'm invited to.
It's like a birthday party every weekend, right?
Yeah, it's fun.
Good. So I'm going to sort of reverse engineer this a little bit, this conversation, and that sort of goes in line with some of the principles in the book here. And I'm going to brag about you because you're about the most humble person I know. So I'm going to have to give you some bragging. But you've been very, very successful in business. And I know that you created one company in particular that you started off with 4, and 20 some years later, you're bringing in over 250,000 people into the company at a time.
Per year.
Per year. And you built a rather large organization, but you've been involved with a lot of other things as well. You've also been involved a lot with your church. That's one of the things that I admire about you. I know you did a mission not too long ago. Here you are at the height of your success in terms of business, and they asked you to come and serve on a mission, and you had to check out for 3 years. So tell us a little bit about that as well.
Well, that was one of the funnest and most special things I've ever been asked to do. Our church is a lay church. There's no pay for it. It's just all volunteer work, and they ask people to help serve where they need them to serve. And so they asked my wife and I to leave for 3 years and to become what we call a mission president and wife. There's 400 areas around the world that are called mission, and each one of them has it's a 3-year assignment. Each one of them has a mission president and his wife that oversee. In our case, we had about 700 missionaries that were there for 2 years, 18 months to 2 years each. And so they would rotate through our mission. We were in charge of hundreds of apartments and cars and people. And we had 55 congregations that we worked closely with all those missionaries. And so it was incredibly busy. In fact, as busy as I've been through my business career, that was busier than anything I've ever done.
And you had to check out from your business while you were doing that. So for 3 years, you pretty much couldn't do anything that you were doing.
That's right. I took a leave of absence, just walked away and moved to South Carolina, Columbia, South Carolina. Our mission was South Carolina and part of Georgia. We did have Augusta, Georgia, thank goodness, in our mission. So I had a chance to play there a bunch of times.
Yeah. But you were living very humbly, though. You weren't playing I know you were playing Augusta, but
we played Augusta National a few times while we were there. But yeah, we lived in a mission home, a home that's owned. They're all nice homes, very nice homes, but on a lake. So we had a nice lifestyle there. But it was just busy helping that area grow.
And the super cool thing about that is that you had built a business, and not only were you able to leave for 3 years to do this, but you came back 3 years later and your business was actually even bigger when you came back than it was when you left, right? I mean, in that 3 years, you actually created an entity that would expand on its own.
Well, our income was close to double what it was from the time we left till the time we came back.
So the time you came back.
Our business continued
awesome.
to grow, and we look at that as a blessing. We
absolutely.
were blessed, and we've just enjoyed our business lives and the things that our business has allowed us to do over our lifetime. It's just been amazing. We do feel very, very fortunate that way.
That's awesome, Mike. Now, listen, a lot of people I know have this idea that, people who have been successful sort of inherited things and, they had life pretty easy, but that wasn't the case with you. Here's where we're backward engineering a little bit, right? So you've had this very successful life and personal business and everything else, but you didn't start off that way. In fact, you started off very, very humbly. and you went through a series of challenges. Your father died on your 14th birthday, I understand, right? On your actual birthday. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, he died in April of 1972. I was 14, and that was a pretty tough time in my life. And I think it helped shape me. I didn't know him real well because he was gone a lot. He was always very busy. But when he died, I became a troubled youth and began to run away. I ran away a few times, and I tell a few of those
it's in the story. It's in
stories in my book. And but I finally settled in little St. George, Utah, where I met some people that changed my life. They just, the first time in my life that I had a sense of belonging. These people pulled me in and encouraged me. And I sort of began to develop a sense of my own identity and who I wanted to be. And I began to set some goals, and just really good things began to happen.
So you were working at one time construction, right? And then you met these individuals, and they not only brought you in the business, but they also taught you principles. You had a good mentor, and you learned these principles and you applied them over time. And that's what you've put in your book.
That's right. I mean, the people back in those days probably didn't teach me as many business principles, but they taught me life principles. And my first job, it was in construction. I moved into this little city. I was 16 and a half years old. I was a runaway boy with really long hair. I actually had hair back then. But
I need to see a picture of that.
Yeah, I could show you some. And it's a long flowing head of hair.
You and me both.
I was raised on a farm. I had we had lots of animals. I had motorcycles and other things. So some of those old pictures of me have me sitting on a motorcycle with long flowing hair. But I came into this little city and I began to ask about a job. And somebody referred me to the most successful contractor in my city. His name was Richard McLaws, and I approached him. I went and found him on one of his jobs, and I said, I'd like to apply for a job to work with you. And he said, well, I'm not hiring right now. And I was scared to death. I didn't have any money, and I ran away from home. I had literally nothing. But he said, I'm not hiring. And I said, it almost felt like I was begging, but I said, I promise you I'll be the hardest worker you've ever hired. And I'll do whatever you ask me to do. And he stared at me with this odd look for just a moment and finally said, all right, you're hired. And that just the way that was handled that day, he hired me and I worked for him. And he assigned me to a guy who was a grunt laborer. He assigned me to a guy that was kind and hardworking and a little bit intense every once in a while, but I felt a sense of belonging there. And then I worked at a skating rink at night and a roller skating rink, and met a girl there who was a good girl. Her name was Lisa, by the way, not my Lisa.
Oh, it's a different Lisa. You better be careful.
I dated this girl named Lisa at the skating rink for almost 3 years. And then I joined the church that I became a part of when I was 17 and a half. And I always thought I would probably marry that girl. Well, I went on a mission with that church, a young mission. I was 19 when I went on a mission with my church, and I came back from that mission. She had written me a Dear John, this Lisa had. Her birthday was April 4th, by the way. She's a great lady. But she had written me a Dear John. I came back and began to date around, and I dated another girl named Lisa. And her birthday's April 4th. The only two girls I've ever dated seriously were both named Lisa, and I married my Lisa. And one of my good friends is married to that other Lisa.
Really? Wow.
And we enjoy seeing each other every once in a while. But those people all influenced my life in such a good way.
So you learned some principles there. And I know, I want you to tell us about a couple principles, but I know one of the principles I can already tell. You learned that hard work. You mentioned that. And let me ask you a question first.
Sure.
Do you know anyone who is very successful who has not put in hard work? I think there's a big deal now with, especially maybe some different generations where they feel, I don't necessarily need to work hard. I need to work smarter. So maybe you can comment a little bit on.
Well, I think we do need to work smarter and learn how to work smarter. But I don't know anybody, to answer your question, I don't know anybody that's succeeded that doesn't work hard. And, I've been through the school of hard knocks. And as a boy, I couldn't have breakfast till the chores were done, till the animals were fed, and some of those things. And so I've always been a hard worker. And when I promised that contractor that I'd be the hardest worker he's ever hired, I would literally run between when I needed to go get something for his foreman. I would run, and I would just literally throw myself in. And when I got into my industry, in the financial services industry, I had that as one of my mottos: is I'm going to be one of the hardest workers. I'm going to be the hardest worker of anybody that I've ever met. And all of us can do that. I mean, anybody can do that. We can work hard. And then as we work hard, we can learn to be smarter and do things better. But hard work, I think a lot of people from a business standpoint, or at least from their understanding of hard work, they're dyslexic. It's not hard work, it's hardly work.
Hard work, yeah.
And so a lot of people don't work hard. And I think it's one of the challenges we have in our society is a lot of people are just trying to find easy ways to win, trying to find easy ways to. In fact, I had a relative of mine that told me that his goal is to be the first millionaire that has never had a job. And, he didn't want to work hard. He just had a dream of one day being wealthy without working hard. Well, that doesn't work. It doesn't happen that way. People have to be willing to go to work and do things that most people won't do. That's another one of my mottos, is that I'm willing to do things that most people simply won't do. And that'll give me the benefits and the success that most people won't have.
There's a saying that hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. I think that's what you're getting at there in summary, right? And I can attest, by the way, how hard you work. My question for you is, you could have retired 20, 30 years ago. You still work hard. And I can't imagine you and I've talked before and you've said something about, I'm going to retire. And I'm like, you're not going to retire. That's not in you. So what is it that still motivates you? Why is that work ethic still there? Why do you keep doing what you do?
Well, I was back in the early 90s. I had become a millionaire a few times over, not to brag about me or my success, but I was happy and successful.
By the way, early 90s. So what age were you about then?
Well, I was still old. I was in my 40s, and I was successful. Still in my 30s actually, but getting close to 40. But I was in a nice little Mercedes one day on a date with my wife, and I'd had a particularly tough day, which we all have. We all have tough times. But I was financially dependent, and financial independence to me means that you have an income that would continue regardless of what you personally do. Because we're not financially independent unless our income would continue regardless of what we do. And so I've been in business all these years wanting to help people do that. And I'd had this really tough day, and I'd shared some of my frustrations with my wife. And we're on our way on a date night. We're going to dinner in this nice Mercedes. And she said, she got frustrated, and she said, honey, why don't you retire? Why don't you just cool it? All this frustration, why don't you just cool it? And it hit me so, because I'd never heard her say that. And I wasn't thinking about cooling it just because I had tough times, because I had a tough day, and I've had thousands of those. I wasn't thinking about throwing in the towel. That I felt like she was saying, throw in the towel. Yeah. Let's get out of this mess. And so it hit me so hard that I pulled the car over. I was driving. I pulled the car over and turned to her, and she was in the other bucket seat over there. And I turned and looked at her for just a minute, and I said, can I tell you why I don't want to retire? Because it's not about us. What about all these people we've brought to the table? What about all these people we love and care about that have helped us become financially independent? I feel obligated to help them do what we've been able to do. And so that's what's driven me over my lifetime is just my desire, my love for our team, for our people, the desire to pay back to those that have helped me become what I am today financially, to be able to help them do the same. And so it's been a fun ride, and there's been a lot of bumps, a lot of turbulence. In fact, life is filled with turbulence. But we have to just continue to go through it. In fact, the other day, Jim, last week I was on it. I have a little private jet, and I had a little trip to Salt Lake City in that. I'm hopping around a couple places, but on my way back, I had that little jet. It's called a Honda jet. It's a 7-place, beautiful little machine. And we were flying at about 35,000 feet. It was going almost 600 miles an hour, faster than the airlines fly. And we hit some of the hardest bumps I've ever experienced in flying in my entire life, commercial or otherwise. And it was so bumpy and so turbulent that it kind of scared me a little bit. I mean, the thing it started shaking around in the sky, and the tables flew up out of their little spots. And if I wouldn't have been wearing a seatbelt, I'd have bled all over the place because it would have thrown me up into the lights above me and some of that. And when we landed, I thought, oh my goodness, that was I was so grateful that we landed safely. But then it just made me think that I've been through so much turbulence in my life, and yet I've survived it, and yet it's made me stronger in most cases. I'm talking about business turbulence, even family, even whatever. I mean, there's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be challenges. There's going to be adversity. There's going to be some really hard times. But if we keep our head down and just stay focused through it and literally charge through it, that's what all an airplane can do, is just fly through that turbulence. You just got to go through it. And it smooths out. We landed, and it was, in fact, 5 minutes later, it was smooth. And we almost forgot about it. It's so smooth, we almost forgot there was turbulence a few minutes ago. And that's kind of how life is, I think.
And I think you've sort of changed your mindset on that. And you've actually helped me with this. You look at that as a blessing, a challenge. Turbulence is a blessing more than it is something that, we should get depressed about and just, and not pursue on. My kids aren't a fan of yours because I told them what you told me about raising your kids. I'm joking. They love it to death, but you always said something that stuck with me about with your kids is that you don't believe in robbing them of their challenges because that builds character. So I've shared that with them whenever they've come to me about something. I'm like, no, you need to do that on your own.
Well, I want to help my kids, and I love them with all my heart, but I think we coddle our families a little so often, especially successful people. I mean, I never had anything given to me. My family had nothing. In fact, I've never seen anybody go through a tougher time than my mom did, our family, after my dad died. And I did have one of my sons one time, and if my son hears this, don't take offense to it.
Well, you got 3 of them, so nobody will know.
But they'll know which one. But one of them said to me one day, he was 21 years old, and he said, Dad, and he'd gone on a mission with my church too, and he's just a successful, incredible kid.
All your kids are good.
They're incredible, all of them. And I think they're the best. I'm a little prejudiced.
Yeah,
yours are.
I agree.
But he said to me one day, he said, Dad, I've been thinking. And I said, okay, what have you been thinking about? In fact, we were in a vehicle driving to a mall, and he wanted me to go help him pick out some fun new clothes. And he'd been back from his mission not a long time, but he wanted to. And so I just wanted to go spend some time with him. So I'm going shopping. I don't like shopping all that much. I'd rather have a root canal than go shopping sometimes. But we're on our way to this mall, and he said, Dad, I've been thinking. I said, okay, what have you been thinking about? And he said, I think I'm going to go ahead and take my inheritance now. I said,
and he was going to knock you off at the time? Or
I said,
or you wanted it early?
I said, excuse me? Say that again? And he said, I want to go ahead and take my inheritance now. And I said, well, I don't want you to be offended by this, but what makes you think you have an inheritance? And he said, well, don't I? And I said, maybe. But I said, I'm not going to rob you of the challenges, of the adversity, of the struggle that's going to make you great. And I think what makes us better is the struggle.
It is.
When I was a little boy, and I don't mean to ramble with these stories.
No, that's why we're here.
When I was a little boy, I used to, if you ever watch a little egg be hatched, like a chicken will lay an egg and then it's got to be at a certain temperature for a number of days. I think it's 21 days. And then all of a sudden you see that egg start moving a little bit. And then all of a sudden you see this little beak pecking from the inside to get out. And then eventually its little beak comes out and eventually it struggles. And if you're a little boy, that seems like 3 years watching a chick hatch come out of its shell. And so the natural tendency of the little boy is to want to help it. You want to help it.
Yep.
And so I can't stand, as a boy, I couldn't stand watching that thing struggle. And so sometimes I would like thump it and peck it, help crack the egg and let it eat it. Well, the facts are that if you help a chick, if you relieve the struggle, it won't survive. In most cases.
Really, that's an amazing story.
And so if you rob a chick of its struggle, you rob it of its life. And the same thing with butterflies. I mean, if you've ever watched a butterfly come out of a cocoon, they struggle for a long time trying to get their wings, and they're all sticky and slimy and all that. And finally their wings will come out, and it's just amazing how straight and perfect a butterfly's wings are. But if you try to help it, which I'm guilty of a lot of times of trying to help a butterfly straighten out, but all you got to do is help it straighten out its wings just a little bit, because it takes hours and hours. But you can do that in 2 minutes or 30 seconds. That butterfly's wings will never be straight, and it will never be able to fly if you touch those.
What an incredible story. Yeah, I think that's absolutely true with people too. Everything I've been through. Looking back at it in hindsight, it was like, wow, that was a actually great experience. That doesn't mean I want to go through it again, but I always remind myself also, by the way, with, I think if people are having tough times, it's not permanent, right? They're going to get through it. And if you use your mindset to say, hey, there's going to be something good that comes out of this, it actually helps a lot.
I'm grateful for my struggles, and strength comes from struggle. It just does. And it's true in the exercise gym. It's true in life in general, that struggle is what makes us better. And yet we spend so much time and effort and energy and even money trying to get away from the struggles. And I think we need to embrace the struggle. We need to go through it with honor and not let it weaken our character, not let it rob us of joy and peace. That have faith that it's going to be better as a result of this, because it is. It generally is.
That's great. Let me go to 2 more things. I'm guessing all of your principles. You mentioned all these principles that you learned, but these are just things that I know about you. And let's talk about positivity. Monte, I have known you for over 20-something years. I've never heard you be negative, especially towards an individual or anybody else, but continuously positive. Tell me how you got that mindset and what that means in terms of your success.
Well, thank you for saying that. I have been negative about others, and I haven't been the perfect person I should be that way. But I do have a fundamental belief that it's never okay to be negative. It's never okay. Nothing good comes out of it. It's never okay to look at the downside and to be negative and pessimistic. I think to be optimistic and positive and excited, you got to sometimes struggle to find things to be positive about and to be excited about. But I just don't think that helps all that much. And for anybody watching this that I've ever said anything bad about,
actually, there's nobody watching it that has. I know there hasn't.
My hope is that we will be a positive people. It's interesting about how the mentality we develop. I think 98%, in fact, I heard this years ago, that 98% of success is mental and 2% physical. But it's all our mentality. It's the mentality we embrace in life. And to decide we're going to be positive and optimistic, and it's just a choice. It's just a conscious decision. And yet so many people, it's so easy to be negative. It's easy to find fault. It's easy to be critical. The 3 C's, to criticize, complain, and condemn. Those are 3 things that most of the world gets really good at. In fact, our political environment, it just permeates our society today.
Yeah, on purpose.
And it's sad to me to see what's taking place. So I want to be positive. I want to be optimistic. And I want to allow, in fact, 30 years ago, I wrote 10 mottos and character, and 10 family mottos and 10 character builders. And I just put those in, I put them in my goals. I've been really good at setting goals and good at reading goals. And I decided from reading some great books years ago, like Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill says, essentially, this is a paraphrase, but he says that which we persist in placing in our minds will eventually seek reality in our lives. So if we persist in placing something in our minds, it eventually seeks reality. And so I decided all those years ago, and one of my mottos was to never allow anything into my mind that's not of a positive, uplifting nature, something that doesn't help me be a better person. So the things I watch, the things I read, the things I listen to, I want to make sure that they're of a positive, uplifting nature that help me be a better person. So that's a goal. I haven't been perfect at it, but that's my goal.
Isn't that true? I've noticed, there's been times where I'll hear a song on the radio or, you'll just hear some kind of song and I find myself hours later, I'm singing or humming that song.
Sure.
And I mean, you can look at it, okay, it's a good song. I call it earworms or whatever. But the other thing is, that's what was implanted in my head, right? So it's the same thing with positive and negative thoughts. They say garbage in, garbage out, right? So if you put negative things in your head, then you end up being negative. It's just like a physiological thing,
right?
It seems, right? Okay, I want to talk about one more, then we'll shift to the book. And then you can jump in on some more principles if you like. Here's the one thing I know about Monty. There's a lot of things I think about when I hear your name, Monty, but here's the biggest one, is persistent. You do not give up on things. And I know we talked about hard work, which is similar to it, but I know if you get on something, you're going to be a pit bull about it and not give up.
Well, thank you. And that is something that I've tried to have as a part of my character, as a part of my being. I'm going to be careful and do my due diligence before I decide to do something. But if I decide to do it, I'm going to do it. I'm going to absolutely do it. I'm going to make a plan surrounding it, and then I'm going to be persistent at it. And it's even when obstacles come up, which, by the way, when you decide to go down a success path, and I hope everybody will listen really clearly to this. If you decide to go down a path, if it's a success path, there's going to be lots of obstacles that jump up that you had no idea were out there, but they're going to crop up, and their goal is to distract you from continuing down that path. And you'll be heading down the path, and something will smack you in the face, and you'll overcome that obstacle, and something else will smack you in the face. And it's just part of what happens in life for those who are on success paths. But and at times it feels like it feels like almost all the elements have gathered against you succeeding down that path. But if you're persistent and you stay at it, 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 what happens is over time, and it's not all that much time, before it almost seems like those elements gather, they begin to gather to clear the path for you. And then they began to gather around behind you and push you on and sweep you along down that path. But persistence is the key. Without persistence, nothing good ever happens in life. And I'm just fanatical about it. I know that to persist means to stay at it. I had somebody say to me back in my earliest days in my career that I want you to imagine the ocean, the waves of the ocean, how persistent they are. They will never stop. They are relentless, and that means they will not relent in trying to beat against the shore. In fact, their goal is to wash the earth into the belly of the ocean, and they just beat and beat and beat, and they are relentless, and they cannot and will not and do not ever stop. And when we have good goals, noble goals, and we have noble intentions and good desires, that's how we should be, as relentless as the waves of the sea. And what's amazing is that if we're that way, we can achieve whatever it is we set out to do.
That's awesome. And that leads us right into the book and the name of the book, which is Expect to Win. And going back to just a personal story that you shared with me before, there's a mindset that we'll talk about, but just in action, when you got into this business, you went out and hired people, an assistant and people to help you before you even had the money to do it. And you set up shop because you were expecting to win when you did that, right? So you want to tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll transition just into that mindset?
Well, yeah. I mean, first I'll tell you why this book is written. The Expect to Win was written out of deep frustration. In fact, I doubt anybody will ever read a book that was written out of more frustration than this book. Because I'd been in business for 25 years. I had succeeded. I did. I hired an assistant. I opened offices. I did a lot of things before I could afford to. Napoleon Hill says to begin whether you're ready or not. And I wasn't ready, but I began and I started doing those things. But over my 25 years of working hard in business, I just I became convinced that most of the people I know and most of the people I deal with in life, if you could do a deep dive psychoanalysis on them, you'd find that almost everybody deep down in their psyche, they expect to fail. And they conduct the affairs of their lives as though they expect to fail, but they hope to surprise themselves and win.
Hey guys, it's time for a potty break. Well, actually, you might want to hold it because you're not going to want to miss what's coming up.
If you're going to win in life, you must have a plan. Benjamin Franklin said people don't plan to fail, they fail to plan. At Financial Advisor On Call, we create winning plans so people can plan to win. Get started today and have a whole team of financial professionals help you with your personalized financial plan. Don't delay, your future awaits.
And now, the Grumpy Old Man's Guide to Etiquette.
Okay, Jim, my turn to do a Grumpy Old Man segment. I know you're the king of the Grumpy Old Man here at the
I'm really
Covering
not
Your
as
Six.
grumpy in real life as what I probably come across as, but
Okay,
well,
that's good. So,
yeah.
what to get you some
Well,
denial
there's times.
denial therapy for you.
Yeah.
First. Okay, so I'm not typically too grumpy, but here's what makes me grumpy. All right, all these cover songs, some of them are great, some of them are stink. But what I hate is when they take a song from like the 80s or 90s that I hated, that they played nonstop on the radio for months and months on end. And then guess what? Now some moron remakes it, and I got to listen to it again constantly now in my life. It's like deja vu from hell. So it's like, please, like the Tracy Chapman song, Driving a Fast Car or something, some clown just did a remake of it recently, and now it's on the radio all over the place. So
Luke, I think that's Luke Combs. So
Luke.
it's a classic song. The problem is you don't necessarily have good taste in music, man, because otherwise they don't do a remake.
Well, yeah, it's like come up with your own song.
Now we should have a segment about remakes that are really good.
There's some I like. Some I like it more than the original. But when it's one I don't like, it's all about me. So the radio should cater to my taste. All right, so that's it. That's my grumpy old man for the day. It's not that bad.
All right, so turn off the radio.
Get a Spotify account. All right.
Hey, this is Jim. I want to thank you for listening. And if you liked the show, which we know you did, or you wouldn't have made it this far, please subscribe, give us an awesome rating, and invite a friend. And if you have any wisdom to share, would like to be on the show, or simply advertise, please visit our website and contact us as soon as possible so that you can contribute to the CY6 community as well.
And they do that from day one because they always say, well, what's your plan B, right? They put that into part of the plan, right?
Yeah.
There is no plan B.
but there is a deep expectation, an unplanned but deep expectation in the psyche to fail. I'm probably going to fail, but I hope to surprise myself and win. Mm-hmm. And I don't judge people harshly for that, because if you look up our family trees, you look at your parents and their parents and their parents and their parents, you look up these trees, unless we come from the Windsor family in England or somewhere where we know success is going to be forced upon us because of our bloodline. That doesn't happen in most of the world. There is no bloodline that's going to give us success. There's no parentage that's going to push success principles down to us. My family wasn't successful financially, and I love them, but I don't know anything about anybody up in my family tree where there's principles that have been passed on to me and down through my family about winning. And because it wasn't passed from their parents or their parents or their parents, so everybody's just got to do the best they can. But the expectation to win just simply doesn't exist without a lot of hard work and a lot of planning. And so I wrote that book out of frustration, wanting to learn to expect to win. And I felt like I did personally. I felt like I learned enough to expect to win. I mean, I had the thing that helped me expect to win was that I envisioned it in my mind. And I tell people over and over and over again for the last 40 plus years now that we've got to clarify and quantify our dreams, turn those dreams, and it's okay to have dreams, big dreams. Make no small plans, for they have no power to stir the souls of men. We need to have big plans, big dreams. We need to turn them into goals with specific deadline dates, and then to move those goals into an actual plan. And when I moved my goals, my dreams and goals into a plan, and I wrote them down, and I got the specifics of what I need to do each year. If I want to be a millionaire by a certain date, that means I need to make this much money by these dates, and I need to save this much. And I put together a plan that just made such good logical sense to me, knowing that it was going to be a stretch. But I began to read those goals and that plan out loud every morning and every night and every morning and every night. In fact, I think the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, the single hardest thing I've ever done in my life, is to continue to read my plan and my goals out loud with passion for up to about a year without believing anything I'd said. But without believing any of what I'd written.
You just kept
I just kept
going on,
reading
right?
because I know that we have to program ourselves. And it's Napoleon Hill, that which we persist in placing in our minds will eventually seek reality. It's a well-known fact that one comes finally to believe whatever one repeats to oneself over and over again. And that includes the truth, and it includes lies. If we repeat lies over and over again, we eventually believe those. But the truth is we can be successful. And for me, my expectations began to change substantially through reading those things every day. And I'd say to myself, man, maybe I can do this.
Yeah,
I think maybe
great.
I could do this. And then boom, I made $8,000 my first year in my business. I made $42,000 my second year. My third year I made, by the way, in those days, my best buddies were getting bachelor's degrees and master's degrees from universities and getting $30,000 a year jobs, which was a big job. And I made $42,000.
Yeah.
Out earned most of my buddies who had done a lot of things that I didn't necessarily do in those days. But my third year, I flew by $100,000 like it was standing still. And over my lifetime, I just feel like that's what changed my expectations. That expectations don't change on their own, and they don't change naturally. We have to go through a process, and that's why I wrote the book. Out of frustration, wanting to talk about the process, trying to get people to do some things that'll help them learn to expect to win.
And you lay it out in here great. I went through this for, I don't know, the fourth or fifth time just in preparation for our discussion today. And I got the highlighter out. And this is one of those books where I started highlighting everything on the page. And I had to remind myself we don't have all day to talk or to read the book out loud, although it'd be great for everybody to do that. I do have a couple things in here. Let's talk about. So we talked about vision, and that's one of the components here. Mm-hmm. Start off with the end in mind, right? So you talked about vision. You had the strong vision of what you wanted to do. I work with a lot of young people at the university, and just I'm at that stage in my life where I'm around a lot of young people with kids and stuff like that. And I often hear, more times than not, they don't know what they want to do. They don't have that vision. So what do you think there are some practical steps, or how does somebody who doesn't really have vision or isn't thinking of vision, what do they need to do to sort of figure out what the vision of their future should be?
Well, good question. I mean, I think most people just hope to get a job and work their way through, and one day they'll luck their way into something. They don't really plan out what they want to do and who they want to be. Every human being should somehow reach out in the imaginary distance and grab a hold of something they want to do or have or be. Whatever it is, and it doesn't matter how big or small. I mean, I don't think we ought to think small, I think. But to grab a hold of some imaginary something we want to do. That's why people say, I want to be an attorney. I want to be a doctor. I want to be, well, I want to be a millionaire. My first two big goals that I ever set, my two goals of greatness, from the time I set my goals, and this isn't from the time I got into my career, but from the time I decided number one was that I wanted to make $10,000 in 1 month by the end of my first year. And to get that vision, it was just me imagining it. I didn't know anybody in my life. I didn't know a single soul that was making 10 grand a month. I'd never heard of anybody. And so I dared to have the vision of me making $10,000 in 1 month by the end of my first year from the time I'd set those goals. Now, I'd already been in the business a good year or so before I really set that as a goal. And my second goal was that I wanted to be a millionaire. I wanted to be a legitimate millionaire before I turned 26 years old. And I didn't know any of those either. But I dared to have that vision. I dared to dream about that. And it's amazing how once you get the vision of it, you can then, if you'll take the time and the effort to boil that down to what have I got to do now to get that done. Most kids don't know what they want to be. Some do decide early what they want to be. But
so what I normally tell them is I have a little criteria that I go through. Is it something that I like? Am I drawn to it? I feel God sort of lays out things that we all like. Is it something I can be good at? Is it something that I can make money off of? Right? Is it something that I like the people and the environment? Is there something I can get out of? I have some criteria that I share with them. But the other thing I tell people is, especially younger people, is go out and try something. Go shadow someone for a day. Go see if you want to be an orthodontist, and go see if you want to be whatever it is. Go shadow them. And I think the most important thing, which goes back to what you're saying, is you got to be intentional about it. If you're just not going to sit around and wait for something to fall out of the sky, it seems most people sort of have that mentality.
Yeah, and that's wise counsel that you're giving people. And I say something similar, that within our environment, everybody has 8 or 10 or 15 people somewhere in their sphere that they know, either close or not, but that they know that's a doctor or an attorney or a successful business person or whatever. And if they don't want to go shadow them, they certainly ought to look at their lifestyle and look at who they are as human beings and decide, who do I want to be like? If they can't choose the career, just find somebody that they want to be like, and then go figure out what they did, and maybe even ask for some time. I was not shy in my early days. I would actually call. There was a guy that was, when I decided I want to be a millionaire before I turned 26, I scheduled an appointment with a millionaire. Told him I'd take him to lunch, hoping he would buy the lunch.
And even millionaires like free lunches.
Well, that this guy was so kind to me and so helpful to me. But he was the most successful person I knew. And I sat there at lunch asking him a bunch of questions and pinned him down on a bunch of things about what he thought I could do to become, and it felt to me like he was rolling his eyes a little bit. I don't think he believed for a second that I would ever become, I don't know that he believed that I was listening all that well or taking all that many notes, but he shaped me. He reached his little paw inside of my head and shaped my thinking in a powerful way. And I left that meeting with some notes. I didn't take as many notes during the meeting, but afterward, before I forgot a lot of that stuff, I went and quickly noted down in fact, I've got so many notebooks of things that I've gotten from these successful people over my lifetime that have shaped me. But people can develop the vision. There's a biblical scripture that where there is no vision, the people perish. And business-wise, most people perish because they don't have vision.
Would you agree with me? In my experience, most successful people are really willing and they want to help, right? I mean, if someone called you up, Monty, I know you'll get a million calls after this and said, can I come shadow you for a day or just pick your brain on this stuff? I mean, I would imagine you would want to help them out. Do you find that with most successful people where they're willing to do that?
There's the right kind of people are willing to pass it forward, and to be able to do it. I get, as do most of the successful people that I know, I get 2 or 3. A lot of people don't dare do that. They don't dare reach out. But in fact, yesterday I got an email. Here I am in Florida right now. But I got an email from a guy that just moved. He runs an education program called Pathways. And I got an email from him, don't know him, but he said, I've heard about you. I've heard you're successful. I want to mentor. I want to ask if you let me take you to lunch, and I want you to help mentor me. I don't know the guy. I don't even know. He didn't even say how he got my name. And I hit him back and said, I'm back in town on such and such a date, and I'll give you 1 hour on such and such a time. And I love to do that. And most people I know, if there's ways we can help other people, we should. We need to. That's one of our responsibilities. Where much is given, much is required, in my view. And I think in order to continue to earn what I've been given, I need to give back in those ways.
Yeah, and so that's what I tell young people is ask, right? Yep. And chances are you'll probably get some response, but the worst thing you're going to get is someone's going to say no, and then that's probably not the person, that you may not want to learn from anyway. So let's talk about the book. I've highlighted some things in here. By the way, this is my son John's version, and he wrote some very nice things in there. So I appreciate that. John's a big fan of yours.
Well, John's a good boy. He's got some good parents too.
We tell him that all the time, and I think he believes it. But,
well, I admire and appreciate you, Jim. And Jim and I, for those listening to this, Jim and I have known each other, as he said, for over 20 years. We worked together on a lot of different projects, and there's some successful ventures that are substantial in our firm and the company that I've been with for all these years that Jim helped us pull together. And Jim's been a success story in his own right, and we appreciate and admire you.
Well, I think that. I thank you for that, Monty. I appreciate that very much. And you got a lot of mentorship from you, which I also appreciate. Let's go on here. We have a couple things. Here's the first thing. We talked a little bit about this to begin with, but I highlighted it. Is that you said in the foreword, believe me when I tell you that in your hands, in the form of this book, you have the key to achieving whatever your mind can conceive for you. You go on a little bit, but you tell them pretty straightforward there. It will require hard work, commitment, and deep examination on your part. So we've talked about those issues already in terms of doing that. But why don't you talk a little bit about that whole deal? I guess where I'd like to go here is how important is it for someone to be brilliant versus, hey, I'm going to follow a system or I'm going to follow some steps and I can do this?
Well, I'm so glad you asked that question because it's one that I think about a lot. Is somebody asked me once, would you rather be a computer or a copy machine? And computer, you create something on a computer, but you just copy things with a copy machine. And I said, for my first while, I'd rather be a copy machine. I'd rather find someone successful and do what they did or what they do. And I actually wrote, Jim, years ago, I made a list of the 21 things that need to be in place before I'm going to follow somebody, before I'm going to let them mentor me. The 21 things that have to be in place. And it was
21. That's
21. It's a lot. But I decided there has to be 21 things before I'm going to listen to or learn much from somebody else. And it has to be, some have to do with character, some have to do with, honesty and good reputation and those kind of things, because those follow you around. But then it went on to things like success. I mean, if somebody's not succeeding at something, and if they're not further down the path that I am, the same path I'm traveling, that's one of the 21 things too, is they need to be on the same path that I'm on. Now, if it's from a family standpoint, they don't have to be in the same business or same spiritual realm as me. But if I can learn from them family wise, then I'll learn there. Or same thing from a spiritual standpoint or from a business standpoint. But I want them to be further down the path than I am on that path. And then they're worthy of copy. And so I do want to be a copy machine. The people that have mentored me over my lifetime are people that have put together success stories and done big things and fun things. So I think you need to not go try to invent the wheel for a while. Maybe once you've caught up to them on the path, or maybe, exceeded where they're at on the path, then you start coming up with your own stuff.
It's sort of the mindset too, is what I read from that. And it goes back to expect to win. But so many times you hear people, I don't have the right education. I'm not as articulate as that person. I don't look like that person, what have you. But what you're suggesting in here is by following this path, which you've proven that it's been very successful, that you don't have to be the rocket scientist, or you don't have to be the superhuman being to be able to follow the things that are in here.
Yeah. You don't. You just need to. I mean, for me, again, this was written out of frustration, but it's an attempt of reverse engineering your life. It's beginning with the end in mind that you mentioned at the beginning of our interview here today. It's looking through an imaginary set of binoculars out into the distance and seeing what you want to do or have or be, and then reverse engineering that, figuring out what have I got to be doing now to get down that path. I liken it to a pipeline in the book. What you want coming out of your pipeline, I want everybody to imagine this. Imagine a pipeline and what you want out of that pipeline gushing out. You want a gusher that's gushing. For me, three things: happiness and peace and prosperity, which means money. That's what prosperity means to me. Mm-hmm. But I want that stuff gushing out of my life. And so I reverse engineered that. How do I get that? I don't just want a nice little drip system or a periodic squirt system where there's happiness and peace and prosperity periodically squirting out. I want it gushing out. But there's things I have to do as you back up and figure out what have I got to do on this end of that pipeline to get it to gush out that other end of the pipeline. And the one you mentioned was faith up front. The first is faith, and then it goes down through the other steps. But if we won't take the time to figure out what we want gushing out, it's hard to figure out these. If you're going to do some reverse engineering, you have to start with that end in mind of what it is you want, and be specific with it.
And then you just move yourself backwards. So instead of starting off on step 1 and then I'm going to step 10, you're starting off at step 10 in terms of designing it and going backwards.
Yeah.
Right?
If I want $1 million a year, what I got to do? Back that up and figure out what I got to do today. You don't start with today and hope that calculates out. And so that's. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist. You don't have to be fancy to put this stuff together. It's, for me, what you have to do is put together a plan, and you got to read it out and read it to where I had to program myself. I think all of us have to program ourselves to get to where we believe that can happen to us. And that's where I was saying earlier about reading it out loud every morning, every night. There came a day when I began to believe what that stuff I was reading.
Yeah. I recently saw some stat that they took successful people, and successful people were very high in self-awareness, and they knew their things, their weaknesses, and they knew their strengths. And one of the things that you put in here that I really like is about making an excuse. And that's one of the things I don't know, it's one of my pet peeves, I guess. And you see people rant or make an excuse for something. So you have things in here about, I don't have enough money, I'm too tired, I don't know the right people. What does that excuse, have you ever seen that excuse mentality actually be helpful? It sort of goes back to what we were talking about with positive and negative thoughts, right?
Well, excuses are an indication of a failure mentality. That's what excuses are. If you're using excuses, that means you have a mentality that you're going to fail, and which is the reverse of expecting to win. It's the opposite of expecting to win. People who expect to win do not use excuses. They don't accept excuses.
Yeah, that's great. So again, I can go through every one of these, and we don't want to do that because the book's actually a very easy read. We have about 100 pages in here, Monty. I think you could read this in just a couple of hours. I wouldn't suggest that. You may want to glance through it in a couple of hours, but I would take, diligent notes and go through here and read it multiple times, but then implement what you're learning in here. So, talk to me about that. I'm a big believer in, okay, it's great. We read a book, we went to a seminar, we feel good, but nothing happens unless you implement, right?
I was in New York. I flew into New York City a while back, and the guy that picked me up at the airport, one of our offices in New York, the leader of that office had chosen one of his people to be my chauffeur. So he met me at the airport, and he was going to drive me around New York, and he was going to take me back to the airport. And he pulls up in this car, and it was a fairly nice car. And not that I care what my ego doesn't need me to be in a fancy car all the time.
Yeah.
But this guy drives me, as we get in the car, and he's driving me from the airport to the office. And on his dash, covering his radio, and he's got all these sayings, all these Napoleon Hill and Tony Robbins, and he's got all this stuff all over his dash. With duct tape and different types of things, just
immersed in it.
And he was immersed in it, and he was a walking, talking encyclopedia of Tony Robbins. I said, why do you like Tony so much? He says, because of how he makes me feel, and I asked him, started asking. He could quote Tony Robbins, he just loved the guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, how many firewalks have you been to? You know what a firewalk is?
Yeah.
I've never been to one.
Yeah, but just for everybody who's listening, share with them what a firewalk is.
Firewalk is where Tony has them overcome their fears by walking through fire, through coals. I've never done that, but other than in life.
Yeah.
Metaphorically, I have. But he
we'll try that after here since we're in Florida.
He said, I've been to 9 firewalks. And I said, 9? Why do you do that? And he says, because I love that, and it's the most impactful thing I've ever done. I said, so how's it helped you? And I got kind of mad, to be honest, frustrated with the guy, because I asked him, how much money did you make last year? He said, 70 grand. I said, how long have you been going? He's been going for over 5 or 6 years to Tony Robbins. And I said, you think that stuff's helped you? And he said, it's helped me a lot. And I said, how's it helped you? I mean, is it shown up on your paycheck? What were you making 5 years ago? And he said, 70 grand. I said, so your income has increased in 5 years. And he said, no, my income hasn't, but my confidence has. And I said, well, that's all BS, I mean, I love you, but that's just BS. I mean, your life's going to change. Is your marriage better? Is it honestly better? Or are you just caught up into all the feelings of going to all this stuff and thinking you're improving when your life's not really improving? I mean, I got pretty intense with this dude. And I think it's possible for a lot of us to get sucked into all this stuff. This stuff, and there's a lot of it out there, this stuff, and our lives don't change all that much. So I hope with this book, and if not this book, other things. The thing that changed my life was one of the things that changed my life was reading Napoleon Hill's book, but stopping on page 36 and actually doing what he said to do, where I wrote that statement. And down the bottom of there, that statement is to read out loud, morning and night. And as you read, you mentioned 3 words that just jumped at me. You must see, feel, and believe yourself already in possession of these goals, of this plan. And I said to myself back then, the first day, I stopped. I didn't keep reading. I stopped and wrote my statement. I stopped and did what he said I should do. And it's not just going and being absorbed in and consumed with all these meetings and all this good stuff. And I'm convinced it's good stuff. Tony writes good stuff, but it doesn't change our lives unless we do something about it.
You get me all excited here. We could keep going on with this for quite a while.
Well, I'm excited.
Yeah. So let's do this though. Let's end on this note. I had some of our viewers send in some questions. So I just got a couple questions. We'll take those and then we'll call it a day. How's that? All right. So here's the first question. Who is a leader that you've found inspiring recently and why?
Okay.
And obviously I didn't prep you for these, so we could come back to that one. It may be a challenge today.
Well, I mean, I had 3 or 4 names that came to my mind as you asked that question. One of the most inspiring leaders I've ever known and met passed away recently. His name's Hiram Smith. He's the founder of the Franklin Covey Franklin Planner.
Yeah, he actually did the forward in your book.
He did the forward in my book.
Yeah,
he did, and he and I have done a lot of things together. But so as far as recent, read that again? Is that asking for
who is a leader that you have found inspiring recently, and why have you found them inspiring?
Well, you know, I mean, I had a flood of names come to me because recently there's you inspire me, Jim. Jason Lindsay inspired me. Jason Lindsay had an idea. You know Jason well, but
exactly.
He simply had an idea. He implemented that idea, and it became overstock.com.
Mm-hmm.
Last week, I was with a guy that's founded the Cimarron Group. His name's James Nadal, and he's a guy that was a capital venturist that started the Cimarron Healthcare Group that's gathering up companies and his vision and I listened to him. I went and met with him for 3 hours here last week. And his vision, his attitude, his personal disciplines and his corporate disciplines just inspired me. And so the thing that inspires me about people isn't as much what they say, it's what they do. It's what they do. It's the personal discipline. It's their vision, it's their mentality, and it's their disciplines. Those things inspire me. So that's the one.
What a great answer. And, you know, that's the biggest thing I often tell people that, you know, out of all the college I went through and the classes, that's the biggest lesson I learned is not to listen to what people say, but watch what they do. And a lot of these leaders, it's interesting. You know, I think when people pose these questions, they're supposed to be about famous people. Maybe they're politicians or, you know, sports athletes or whatever. And I always hate that idea of calling politicians or athletes leaders, but it's everyday common people a lot of times, right? It's people who aren't famous.
Well, they're the founder of SkyWest Airlines, one of the fastest growing regional airlines in the world. He's inspired. He's been inspiring to me for the last number of years to know him and to watch him do what he does. There's a lot of people, but again, it's there. I want everybody to just hone in on these things because this is what we've got to do. It's their vision, it's their mentality, and it's their disciplines that set them apart. Those are the things that inspire me.
Yeah, and I'm just going to throw mine in there because I'm going to try to get them on the podcast. But I'm in a softball hitting club. It's led by a 95-year-old gentleman named Clarence, and he organizes everything. He's out there. He still throws at 95, and just really amazing and inspiring. When you can talk to someone like that, and he was 16 during World War II, right? There's all these resources out there. But we're going to try to get Clarence on one of the podcasts here and talk to him. It'd be a great interview. All right, here's a couple more. What are some of your favorite strategies for effectively managing your time and organizing your day?
Well, I don't go to bed at night without having my next day pre-planned with specificity. I just don't. I can't even sleep without having my next day pre-planned. And I think having my days pre-planned with what I'm going to do, I want to see the outcome, and I like to use the same begin with the end in mind. By the end of tomorrow, I want to do this and this and that. I want to have that. And then I'd reverse engineer that. So I take my planner, which is now my phone. I did use the Franklin planner for a lot of years. I use Daytimer, which I have 20 years of Daytimers. I can go back in my life and show you what I was doing on any specific day for the last 45 years.
Yeah, and I know that for a fact. Yeah.
And where I was at what time. I can, but I like to pre-plan it. I don't go to bed at night without having things planned out. And when I do plan them out, it's who I'm going to talk to. It's when I'm going to talk to them. It's what I'm trying to achieve. It's just planned out with specific. And I don't leave a bunch of holes in my day. I don't believe in having pockets of free time in my day. I want to max it out and compress activity. And so that would be my answer.
And those little pockets sometimes are so useful. I used to tell my kids, I saw a seminar one time, I know that you've seen this, where they fill up a jug with rocks, and then they ask if it's full, and then they put in sand, and then they put in water. And the whole idea is you get all these little cracks. And so I find that sometimes you spend 15 minutes a day reading a book. And before the end of the week, you're 2.5 hours, right? Into the book. So I always show my kids with their homework or whatever, you don't have to sit down for 3-4 hours and do this. Do a little bit at a time, absorb it, come back in those little pockets of time are very, very helpful. All right. So 2 more real quick here. How did you keep your team involved and engaged in the ongoing process of planning and visualizing the goals of your business as well as their own personal goals?
Well, the best way to keep your team, and my team, in my mind, my team is myself, it's my wife, it's my family, and it's my business associates, my staff. And communication is the key to that, to keep your team involved in supporting you. And I want them to see the positives and the big picture of what we're aimed at. And it takes communication. A good leader communicates the vision of what we're trying to do. It engages everybody in that vision without the negatives. You pass negatives up and positives down, but your team around you needs to see the positives, and they need to be excited about it. You know, if your team's not engaged in supporting you and actively excited about helping you achieve it, it's a lack of communication.
That's a great answer. So you've been very gracious with your time. We got this last one, and this is full circle. This comes back. We started off talking about your personal life and your family. So you have something called the 4Fs, which includes family in there. And you can go over the 4Fs in this last answer that you have. The question is, how did you find balance between your 4Fs? How do you rebalance your 4Fs when experiencing new changes / disruptions?
Okay. Well, first let me explain what those 4 F's are. I've always thought the best words in the English language start with the letter F. And the worst, most despicable words in the English language start with the letter F.
Did you want to go over those?
No,
Okay.
But I do want to
go over the first
positive
ones.
ones.
Okay, yeah.
And they're all centered around 4 things. Faith. Faith is a belief in things we've not yet seen. So, and I'm talking about religious faith, but not religion. I'm talking about just general faith, which is akin to hope. But faith is the first one. Family, finance, and fitness. And so to balance those things in life, you're going to have to rebalance at times. It's, you know, if I have a round tire that's going fast and smooth, it doesn't have a lot of shake to it, a balanced tire, that's good on a car. If it gets out of balance, imagine something that's completely smooth on 3 sides and flat, where it's thumping along. I mean, you're going to have to fix, if there's a flat spot, you're going to have to fix it. If you're not healthy and fit, then you're going to have to focus on that and get rid of that flat spot. I mean, to have a fun, balanced life. There's some, you know, my belief is from a spiritual standpoint, if I'm not going to be ultimately happy in my spirit and my soul if I'm not balanced with my faith and my family and my finances and my fitness. And so I'm going to try to keep those balanced. And if I am balanced, if I keep my faith where it should be, without trying to impose any religious views on anybody, I've always thought God can give me 168 hours a week, and yet I struggle giving him back 1 or 2 going to church on Sunday. I mean, he gives me 168, and I can't give him 2 for 1. Or God can give me all of my income and every breath. I mean, from my perspective, every breath. I mean, you just take a breath, that's God given in my view. He can give me my breaths, and yet I can't give. He can give me my income, my ability to earn income, and I can't tithe. And so I want to keep my faith a balanced thing. From a family standpoint, my family, I'm going to be present when I'm with my family. If I'm going to have a balanced life, that means when I'm home, I need to be present. I need to be present. That means I need to shut down all the other nonsense and be with them. I want to date my wife every week. I want my kids. I want to spend one-on-one time with my kids. I want them to feel a sense of belonging, unlike any place or anything that they would ever experience anywhere else. I want them to feel that with me, my family. And one of my family mottos is that us against the world, not us against each other. But we're a team. We're a unit. We're a sacred trust that's pulled together as a family. And so I teach that to my family often. From a business standpoint, wealth and stability, or at least financial independence, gives you the ability to do things that are just amazing. It's so worth it. It's so worth it to have that balance, that financial balance in your life. And then same thing with fitness. And if we can learn to balance those things, there's a whole bunch of other overarching. I want you to imagine those 4 F's: faith, family, finance, and fitness. And the key I'm going to add some other F words real fast. I know I'm talking.
It's okay. Yeah.
So faith should be the foundation. There's a good F word of our lives. Family, fidelity. There's another great word. Fidelity to our family. F word, finance, frugality. Meaning that we're living within our means and handling our finance. That's another good word. And fitness would be fun, or I would say food. Food is the key to fitness. 80% of fitness is what we eat and how much of it. And then the fun and all that. Those are some good F words. But then if we do those things right, there's some overarching F words that I want to throw out, like fortune, like good fortune. And we build a fortune. Like future, like we have a bright future. My favorite F word of all F words is freedom. It gives us freedom. That's the big overarching word, freedom. And we have freedom, which means gives us lots of choices. And freedom is what we all seek most in life. And it means freedom from debt, freedom from pain, freedom from bad marriage issues because we're good husbands and we're balanced that way. Freedom from fear. And we have confidence, and we ultimately expect to win.
That's a great way to end it. Thank you so much for your time, Monty. I think you helped a lot of people today. You continue to do that, and just people need to go get this book and learn how to expect to win.
Thank you. Enjoyed being with you.
And now, your financial fix.
Okay, Jim, we're going to sometimes we do financial fixes on here since our sponsors, Financial Advisor on Call, specialize in financial wellness and helping people out. But today we're going to do one for the friend fix. So we keep going down our 6 F's, and friends are a huge important one. And guys like us at our age, it's hard for us to make friends sometimes because, one, we're guys, right? We're tough. We don't need anybody. And we rely on our wives a lot to do that, or I do. And, they're good about keeping in touch with their friends and set up things for the family and all. But this is one area we kind of need to be a little bit more like the women. And hear me out, because making friends, you got to be intentional about it, right? You can't just magically have friends. You have to make an effort. And it's tough for us guys. I know you have friends you probably haven't talked to in 8 or 9 years that you've made years and years ago. And if you called them right now, it would be just like you pick up where you left off, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I got one who was in our wedding I went to high school with, and Ronnie, who literally won't see for years, and He'll
Yeah.
show up for whatever I need, and I'll show up for whatever he needs. But
Yeah, it's awesome.
important.
I have quite a few like that, and we laid the groundwork earlier in our lives for that. But as we get older and things change, our kids grow up. We don't have those we're not putting those situations like little league and things where you kind of start to get some camaraderie with some people. So you have to be intentional about it. And if you're at church or different places, and you just have to reach out to people, you got to invest some time in it. I had a guy complain to me, go, none of my buddies call me or whatever. I was like, well, how many people have you called?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And and there's a commitment to being a friend, right? It's not,
Yeah.
we're too old to play games, man, or you should be more mature than that. And it's like, if you want to talk to somebody, call them. But, I have an expectation for my friends. It's like, okay, I'm not going to be the one that calls all the time. You got to
Yeah.
invest a little bit in yourself, in the relationship as well. So,
Yeah, exactly. Well, you and I have been friends for a long time, and we celebrate the
and
highs.
you never damn call me, man. How come you never call me?
Well, you're not sending me your checks like you're supposed to. That also helps.
You do call. You do call.
Anyways, just make an effort, guys. If you're feeling lonely, it's okay to admit that. We all feel lonely at times. It's like, look, just be a good friend, and that's how you make friends. So,
and by the way, who are you going to talk about your wife? If your wife's the only friend, I mean, you're going to have to vent somewhere, right? You
got to vent somewhere, and I would not vent about your wife to your wife. That's another good advice. That's another segment.
That's right.
We'll add that to the family segment. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
See you, buddy.
All right. See you, buddy.
We hope you enjoyed the show today and learned something new. Remember, knowledge without action is meaningless. So make sure to be intentional about life and live it to the fullest. And most importantly, get out of your comfort zone. And always, always remember to dream big, live with purpose, and attack the day.
It's time for the joke of the day.
One of my favorite Roddy jokes is when he went to the hardware store to buy rat poison, and the clerk's like, "Should I wrap that up, or you're going to eat it here?"
All right.
He said, "My wife's a bad driver. She hit a deer once. It was in a zoo." Good job, guys. Lots of fun.
All right, everybody. Have a good laugh. Take care.